Hi, I'm attachment specialist Adam Lane Smith, and today I want to talk to you about expectations and how they can kill you. Expectations are some of the worst things in the world when they're not based on reality. When expectations are not based on reality, when you are just guessing, when you're trying to figure out what other people expect from you, or when other people are trying to figure out what you expect from them, your life can become hell. Because none of us, very few of us, I should say, very, very few, almost none, we don't expect the best. We don't look for the best. We don't imagine the best. Our minds go to the worst case scenario. And the more stressed out we are, the worse this becomes. So expectations, you might be watching this right now and say, it's not that big of a deal. Expectations, unstated expectations, unclear expectations, hidden expectations, they become terrible under the right circumstances. When everything else is starting to go wrong, expectations like this make everything else worse. It's the secret sauce that makes your life horrible. If you don't control them, they will blow up at the worst possible time. So, what are expectations? Expectations are when you're working with somebody else or you're in a relationship with someone else and they make you in some way feel that something in that relationship is mandatory. It might be that they need you to work certain hours. Hey, I need you. It would be helpful if you could work on Saturday, your boss might say. Or if you're a contractor, it could be that your client says, hey, you know what? I could really use these pieces by Saturday. And the expectation is now set of, they need it by Saturday. And if I don't do it perfect, they will think less of me, or they will be inconvenienced, or something bad could happen. It could come from attachment. It could come from they won't approve of me. They will disapprove of me. They will see that I'm a fraud. That could be a piece of it. It could also be that you have great attachment, but you've never learned to manage these expectations, or you are stressed out. So you want to genuinely help people, but now their expectations, or your perceived expectations of what they have, are flawed. And your brain now says, if I don't do X, their life will get difficult. I must do X to help them. Okay, you can probably manage around one person. What if you have two people with those missed expectations? This client needs my work on these days, and my spouse and or my kids have these expectations of me on these days. And I'm not talking to anybody about the clear expectations and having a team discussion with each group about those things and where we can manage them and my expectations, my needs, a balancing act. I am taking them on because I am supposed to. Maybe I'm a man who takes on expectations, or maybe I'm a mom and I must do these things and not push anything back on my family. Whatever our reasons are for taking those expectations on, we drown under them. We drown under them. And these are the sources of so much of our stress, because most people can take on a big pile of things as long as they are organized and as long as they do not conflict. These expectations from other people create blocks in our schedule or blocks in our mind that we cannot shift around. And that forces us into narrow channels where we can't adapt, we can't improvise, we can't change. It creates these forced blocks that we must now live around under somebody else's conditions. And when those conflict, tremendous turmoil happens. Because our brain starts saying, I can't do the one thing that would bring me peace. When your peace is threatened, you do not have any. You do not have any, because your mind will do anything just about to get back to equilibrium where peace is not threatened. Expectations. The only way to beat this is to have a discussion about it. Is to talk about it. Is to go to that person and say, here are what I'm perceiving as your expectations. What are mandatory and what are optional optimizations where I have some wiggle room. So if it's a client, or a spouse, whoever it might be, what do you desperately need from me that you cannot live without? What are your mandatory needs? What is the absolute minimum? Let's start there. And what are the optimizations you would like to have that as often as I can help you reach, but it's okay if it's down here some of the time because of my conflicting schedule. That right there, that will solve so many problems. Having clear on paper what these expectations are is tremendously helpful. One of the places that this really blows up in a couple, money. What are the absolute expectations for the budget that we will keep that I should not spend more than X? What would be the worst amount of money I could spend on? Some people get groceries and they go to the store. They buy extravagant groceries and their spouse is like watching them buy all these groceries. Some people want to go out all the time and eat and the other spouse does not want to. Some people are, I collect books. I collect a lot of paperbacks and hardbacks. A lot of books. Some people video games. Some people shopping, clothes, shoes. It can be anything. Money, huge problem because we do not discuss what are your minimum expectations for a bank account, what are my minimum expectations, especially if you have shared accounts. Most couples do have a shared account once they get married. Expectations. So we don't discuss them. Then our expectations are different. And our mandatory minimums is different. And our budget levels are different. And we don't talk about it, so we overspend. And then something happens because you overspend for 5 years. And now there's a debt. Now there's a problem. Now there's whatever it might be. Couples fight so much about money. Another area where couples fight, sex. What and when and who and all kinds of things. All kinds of things. Hopefully you've settled the who, but you may not settle the when, the how, the why, the what, all of the other pieces that go into that, because there's a lot of moving pieces to discuss in the sexual life of a couple. Having those expectations of what are your minimum expectations, and what do I need to be able to meet that minimum, so that I'm not just your robot slave here helping you accomplish it. And what can we both do? Sex, huge. Emotional intimacy, also huge. Also huge. Stereotypically, men for sex and women for emotional intimacy, but both need both, and some people need one of more and one of the other than the stereotype would hold for. Emotional intimacy. How often should we be going out and getting time as a couple? How often should we be having dates? How often should we... All of those pieces need to be discussed. Client work. Clients are going to pitch to you what they'd feel like is going to be the best. And if you hopefully can meet it, great. Bosses do the same thing. There's usually some wiggle room built into that. And it's okay to push back and ask, clarify. Here is where I am at, especially if you can explain where you are at. Here is where I'm at. What would be the best way for me to help you within that time frame? Put it back on them. Odds are good they're not going to be evil and say, I don't care about your needs. You will do X, Y, and Z at this exact time. Some corporate employers might do that. But if it's any decent relationship with a decent human being, they will probably say, okay, realistically, here's where I'd like. Here's the deadline I'd like. Here's the absolute deadline. Please do not always hit the absolute deadline. I'd really prefer it here. And as close as you can get it to the preferred, the better, even if it's only, a day early or a week early or whatever it might be. Absolute deadline, preferred deadline. And then you have this gap. Please make it happen as soon as possible. And then you commit to that and say, okay, I will make that happen as soon as I possibly can. As soon as I can do that, I will do it. Same with sex. Same with money. Sometimes you're going to go over budget. I'm talking about money, not sex. Boy, that's a whole other talk. Sometimes you will go over budget on money. When is that okay? What's the absolute minimum? What's the absolute mandatory? What would destroy your finances? Something you got to talk about. I've seen a lot of couples crumble because somebody overspends over and over and over without knowing it, without knowing what the other person's expectation is. Kids, very similar. Very similar. When you're talking with your children, what are their expectations? My kids want to spend every single waking second with me as much as possible. And if they don't get that, then it's like I've abandoned them in the woods and they're going to die. But there's thresholds. I love my kids and I love spending time with them. And I tell them that. I love spending time with you. Here are my needs in the relationship. For us to eat and have groceries and have a home and for me to be able to provide these things for you, which I love to do, I need this amount of time. It is not time that I'm not spending with you because I don't feel like it. I must work for us and for our family. And when you grow up someday, you'll be doing the same. We can work together. We can pool our resources, building that generational building and generational living in early. We can work together. My stress load will decrease because we'll both be pulling financially. You won't have to work as hard as I do because we'll be working together and living together and pooling our resources. Again, indoctrinating for the generational living. But this right here, this sets up the expectations of here is where I'm at. Where are you at? What is your mandatory and what is your preferred? And you'd be surprised how early even a 5-year-old can tell you, I need X, Y, and Z, even just a little bit. Even if you just listen to them, you can figure out a lot of that. And you can start offering and saying, okay, every single night, I can give you at least whatever it might be, an hour before bedtime, a half hour before bedtime. For me and my family, because for years I had to work so many hours, sometimes 70 hours a week, sometimes it was a reality of I will be able to spend 20 minutes with you before bedtime, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But Friday, I'm loading so much into these other days. Friday, I will take off of work. I will make Friday my weekend. I will do nothing on Fridays except spend all day with you from the moment you wake up at the crack of dawn until the moment you fall asleep at night. I will do nothing but spend time with you. And you'll notice my posts don't come out on Fridays. I'm not very active on anything on Fridays because I'm just zoomed in on all my kids and my wife. It is just a family day. That has been their mandatory. They can look forward all week to Friday with my completely undivided attention. And that lets them know that they are my priority. And then the more optional time I get throughout the week, if I finish early on a Wednesday, I have 2 more hours, 2 extra hours. And I say, okay, kids, 2 extra hours. It's great. We run. If it's snowy right now, it's snowy, horrible, and icy cold. But if it's not negative 40 degrees, we run outside. We play the soccer ball. If it is ice cold, we read books. We paint. We do all kinds of games for 2 hours, 2 extra hours. And I pour that into them and say, here's your optionals. We did the mandatories. Here's your optionals. Sunday, again, another family day. A lot of errands and stuff too. But Sundays, as much family time as possible. The goal is talk about it. Talk about it and work together. Solving your problems on your own, especially with other people's secret expectations or what you project to be their secret expectations, that is a disaster. That is a recipe for disaster, and not when you think everything's going fine. Because you might be watching this right now and scoffing and saying, I'm able to manage it. You could probably manage it right now. When you are sleep deprived for a week, when work is not going well and it's tense, when you've made a mistake there and people are upset or whatever it might be, or it's the winter season or it's your busy season, when someone dies in the family, when all of those align and you are already stressed, that's when these things hit you. That's when these weights that you have been dragging around suddenly become too heavy. You manage them by going to the other person and saying, here's where I'm at. I'm perceiving a tremendous amount of weight right now. I need to know how much is mandatory and how much is optional. Here's where I'm at. Given my parameters, what can I do for you to best serve your needs? Where are your mandatory needs and where are your optional wants? Let's talk about that spectrum that I can hit. So I have I have a range that I can hit instead of trying to hit one little tiny target while my hand is already shaking. That will solve a huge number of your stress problems. That will, at work, in love, with your kids, with your friends. That right there will solve a majority of your issues. Odds are good you're not going to have horrifically unreasonable people who treat you like crap and get mad at you for having problems or struggles or parameters or needs. Odds are good the majority of the people in your life are going to say, okay, if that's the given fact, then let's work around it together. Here's where we're at. And then you can deal with that. You can deal with facts. You cannot deal with the worst case scenarios in your head over and over and over of saying, I have no idea how I'm going to make this work. You can't deal with struggling against your own mind against your own fear and against your own unreasonable expectations, because that's really what most of that is. So go out, have those conversations, and resolve them together. Thank you. I'm Adam Lane Smith. If this has been helpful, please like, comment, subscribe, help the channel grow, spread this out, spread the word, and let's cut down some unreasonable expectations.